Hey guys, Devin from Boostin here. In today's episode, we're tearing down the Red Demon engine, the engine we used in Maryland at World Cup Finals 2024. We went 680 in that pass, but we've got a lot of new YouTube subscribers, and I just kind of wanted to let you guys know what we do here. So we started with Mitsubishis, DSMs, Evos. We do everything from engine builds, transmission builds, track support, maintenance, repair. We've got an all-wheel drive dyno in-house. We do all that stuff. The natural progression from that, you know, obviously we dabble in some Subaru stuff, but the progression from the Mitsubishi stuff was the R35 GTR. So we work on those. We've got a 7-second A90 Supra here. We also do the GR Corolla platform and also the Dodge Hellcat platform with HP tuners. So let's get back to today's video. For those of you that don't know, this is Red Demon. It is the quickest and fastest 4-cylinder stick shift car in the world. And in our next video, we're going to be getting it ready for TX2K. And we've got some changes that we made with the car. We've got a new turbo from Apex that we're going to be unboxing and showing you guys. And then we also have a full carbon drive shaft from Drive Shaft Shop. So before, we had a half and half steel carbon unit. So I have a feeling this is going to take a bunch of weight off the car, and we'll be weighing it in our next video. So here's the motor we're going to be tearing down. Like I said, we ran this in World Cup Finals. We leaned on it really hard. So we should probably find some interesting stuff. Come check it out. This is the motor that we went 685 on, 215. And we're gonna tear it down, see what it needs, because we gotta get it back together for the race that we have coming up in March here, which is TX2K. So it's about a month before that right now, and we gotta tear this down, figure out what it needs, get it freshened up and back in the car. So if everything goes well, hopefully it only needs rings and bearings, but usually when we're putting a bunch of steam to this thing, you know, running 80, 90, maybe 100 pounds of boost, with nitrous on top of it, it usually needs, you know, something. So we'll see. That's the reason why we take it apart so often. After every event, you know, I would say we probably make 8 to 10 passes on the engine. We'll take it apart. Sometimes we find nothing. Sometimes we find some pretty catastrophic stuff to where if we would have making a couple more passes, it would have been bad news. So basically this specific engine in Maryland saw upwards of about 105 pounds of boost with nitrous on top of it. So it had plenty of power to go 220 mile an hour. We just had some issues with the clutch, the passes not being quite clean, one of the shift cuts kind of killing power in between the 3-4 shift. And even with those issues, we were going 215, 216. So it's the most power we've ever put to this engine, 105 pounds of boost and nitrous. So we're gonna take it apart, see what it needs, and check it out with me. All right, so we got the motor all disassembled, and this is, like I said before earlier, this is the motor we ran in Maryland. It ran north of 100 pounds of boost, and it had nitrous on top of it. When we did hit the nitrous, it slipped the clutch. It was on the rev limiter for about 0.8 of a second in 4th gear, so almost a second in 4th gear, and about half a second in 1st gear on that last pass. So the rev limiter ends up being about 12,000 RPM. We try and stay away from that limiter, but obviously when stuff happens, stuff happens. So the engine actually seems pretty happy given the conditions that it ran under. The head gasket seal was really nice. you know, the car drove up in the trailer, ran great. You know, it's not like there was an issue with the engine, but like I said earlier, we take this thing apart in case we find something. It's a lot easier to do this and find a small thing like maybe some play in a wrist pin or a rod bearing that's not happy, or maybe a minute crack in the crankshaft, then find it on the racetrack. You know, when you're picking up motor pieces and your billet block has a huge hole in it. So, and then it's a safety issue too. You know, like we probably run each engine maybe 8 to 10 passes. And then when we're going to travel across the country for the next event, we want a fresh engine in the car. You know, not only for our safety, for everybody else's safety, and for the fact that you know, it's just a proper way to race. So head gasket seal looks great. Mains have a little bit of wear on them, nothing crazy. We took a look at the crankshaft. The crankshaft looks really good. All the journals on the crankshaft are very, very nice. The one that's a problem on these 4Gs is number 4 rod. And because all of the power from every cylinder is going through that journal, it tends to be the weak point. So that looks good. The number 4 rod bearing looks actually pretty decent. We're gonna get the crank magnafluxed anyway, just to make sure that everything's good. Some of the other things that we look for, aside from the bearing wear, would be some wear on the pistons. So I'm gonna turn them so you guys can kind of see them. So this is the thrust side of the piston, the side of the piston that's kind of shoved against the cylinder wall. And aside from the coating just being missing in a couple areas, there's no scratching. A little bit there, but not too bad, especially, you know, 12,000 RPM. Obviously, we're not going to reuse these bearings, but every time we tear an engine down, we're doing rings and bearings, minimum rings and bearings. And then we basically keep track of how many passes the rods have on them. We keep track of how many passes the pistons have on them. And as long as we're within the service limit, which we've kind of developed over the years of racing, we'll go ahead and reuse that stuff as long as it checks out good and we're within that service limit. So another thing we look at that has especially been an issue is the small end of the rod and going into the piston. So basically, there's a lot of wrist pin capture in this design on purpose. So basically that means that the wrist pin's being captured by the piston and the rod a lot. I mean, there's a little bit of movement side to side, but just enough for oiling and for a little bit of movement of the piston. So lots and lots of wrist pin capture, and the reason for that is the small ends of the rods tend to get deformed, ovaled out over time, especially when you're making, you know, 500 horsepower per piston per rod, which is basically what we're making here. So basically it'll have play. So if this is the wrist pin, it'll be able to move a little bit like that, and these feel really nice. So that's cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 3, cylinder 4, all nice and tight. So the rods I know have 6 passes on them. We're going to go ahead and reuse the rods for the next build. The crankshaft, as long as it magnaflux good, which I assume it might, or I assume it will, based on the bearing wear that I see, we'll be able to reuse that. The pistons, I believe I'm going to get the walls of them coated, or the piston skirts coated, I should say. That way I can hone the block and get the correct piston to wall tolerance again. So that's kind of where we're at with this. Head gasket looks good. As far as the head goes, we'll send that to our machine shop. It was running good, so I don't really think there's going to be much there. Aside from that, this thing looks pretty darn good. You know, the power that we put at it, I know is good for 220 mile an hour, given the fact that we had some clutch slipping and not a clean pass, and we were still going 215, 216 with issues. Really happy with how this engine looks. Everything looks really good, and I think we definitely improved upon our last piston design, given that everything is nice and tight still. So great news. We're going to get this motor together for TX2K with the same parts, hopefully the same crankshaft and all that. We already have our second engine built, so that's going to go in the car. This will probably be our spare. See you guys at TX2K.